We turn now to our latest CBS News poll of the 2024 presidential race, and it shows the likely nominees effectively tied. Among voters across all 50 states, former President Trump leads President Biden by 1 point, 50-49. But if we're looking at voters across the 7 states identified by CBS as the battlegrounds likely to decide the election, those numbers are flipped, and President Biden is ahead of his predecessor by 1 point, 50-49. Joining us now for some analysis is our Executive Director of Elections and Surveys, Anthony Salvanto. Anthony, you've been telling us this is going to be a close race. Data supports that at this point. We're now 10 days past that Trump conviction in a New York courtroom. What have we learned?
That conviction matters some. The impact is limited, but it's there. And here's why. First of all, context. Voters do not rate the trial as anywhere near as important as things like the economy and inflation, things where Donald Trump has advantages. But we do see a little bit of activation there, especially among the Democratic base, of voters for Joe Biden who are now more motivated by opposition to Donald Trump. Specifically, the number of Joe Biden voters who say that their primary reason for voting for Joe Biden is to oppose Donald Trump is up, and it's now a majority of his vote. We've also seen folks among the Democratic base a little bit more motivated to turn out, kind of erasing some of that expressed turnout advantage that the Republicans had in the battleground states, and among a couple of key demographic groups, independents, et cetera, where Biden gets a little bit of traction there. But again, one of the reasons that this is limited is that then the Trump folks tell you they think the charges aren't serious. They think everything is political. What it does do, though, is put a spotlight on the campaign to define what this campaign is about. And when you ask people, is this a judgment on Donald Trump for you? When that happens, Joe Biden wins those voters by 2-1. But when people say that this contest is about a comparison between the two or a referendum on Joe Biden, Donald Trump does much better. And part of the reason he does much better is that Trump does better than Biden on a lot of these qualities, like being tough, being effective. Biden does better on being personally liked, on being compassionate. What does all that tell you? Is that each of these campaigns is going to try, at least in part, to make this campaign about the other guy as much as, or at least or more, as what they're going to do.
Anthony, let's talk about some of the issues you say are important to voters. The border's one of them. President Biden did issue an executive order this past week. It authorizes U.S. officials to deport large numbers of migrants without processing asylum claims until the border crossings number dips below 1,500. So it's essentially suspending some of the asylum processing. Trump's been perceived as stronger on the border. Does this change anything?
No, Trump still is. More people think that Donald Trump's policies would stop or slow border crossings more than Biden's. Having said that, there is widespread support when we test in general terms for what President Biden just did. He gets 7 in 10 support on that. It's overwhelming among Republicans. It's also strong among Democrats. Look, context there. People have said they think that the border is in crisis for a long time. Having said that, you know, we have a lot of the campaign rhetoric speaking of what people say they would do. You've seen the Trump campaign talking about mass deportations. We tested that in a general way in principle. Would you support a new government program that would deport all people living in the U.S. illegally? And that finds majority favor. That finds 6 in 10. It's strongest among folks who are MAGA. It's strongest among Trump supporters, but also from some Democrats as well. And I think that that speaks to the general idea, not just that people see the border as a crisis, but also where we are in the campaign, where a lot of very dramatic or new proposals out there are finding favor here.
So unpack that a bit, because this 62% of Americans favor deporting all undocumented immigrants. So Homeland Security says that President Biden has already deported or repatriated more people in the past year than any year since 2010. And then, depending on the details of what's talked about on the campaign trail, some of what Mr. Trump talks about could be illegal. It doesn't seem practical in some sense to round up children. And then we know that the courts have questioned whether local authorities would have the ability to do it. And federal authorities don't have the resources. So what exactly do people think they're supporting?
Well, when you measure public sentiment on this or really just about any policy, you're getting a sense of direction, you're getting broad brushstrokes, but those kinds of details, well, that's often up to the legislatures and the courts later on. We tested even the idea of should local law enforcement be involved in this? And a lot of folks do say yes. Again, the details of that, the specifics, you're not going to pick that up in an aggregate public opinion.
They weren't tracking the Supreme Court decisions.
Undoubtedly not. But look, it does tell you, though, for the viewer watching this campaign, that what we're seeing here connects to whether it's the courts, what some people say is the politicization of the courts, these ideas of mass deportations, et cetera. We are in a different era in which a lot of folks say the system as a whole is not working. And all of these, if you connect the dots through them, are part of that reaction against it, which explains some of that general sentiment for some of these policies.
It's really just kind of a do something.
Do something.
Anthony Salvanto, thank you very much for your analysis.